Hey Planet Earth, Untamed Druid again, coming at you live with number 13, calling this one the Christ. So really, it's going to kind of be about religion a little bit. I am Christian, sort of, so I'm going to go into that essentially in this video, but I just wanted to talk about what's going on in the Middle East and in Palestine slash the Israel conflict has been going on forever, but it's escalating now. I think I just saw Netanyahu's going to step down from being the leader of Israel or something. So there's lots of shakeups going on, and then there was, of course, the violence um, recently where Palestine was being, bombed. I just figured that would be a really good thing to talk about since it's a modern pop pop topic that people want to have insights on. And I'm not really going to be. I'm going to be providing more of a pseudo historical kind of if that then this kind of logical argument. So it's not really even. I'm not trying to talk to people that only believe, what I believe. This is supposed to be as scientific as possible so that everybody can at least participate. I'm going to be referencing the Bible a bit, but I mean, you can't really talk about Jesus without talking about the Bible. So, and this video is called The Christ, so we will be talking about Jesus. If that turns you off, you might want to hit the video, like the back button, and just get off this video, because that's what we're going in on today. So I've got a lot written down, so I might be looking not at the camera all the time, but yeah, I also have autism, so don't judge me. Yeah, so why I say pseudo history is because, like, why I'm going to talk about what I'm about to talk about in the way I'm about to talk about it is because history is very personal for people. Certain topics, denying that certain things happened when when we have, not only books that confirm that they happened and give, shocking details into different things that happened, different atrocities, different genocides, or what have you. Um, those things, people are still connected to those things. Those things happen to people, and there's people with personal connections to these different atrocities that have happened throughout history. So even just talking about history, people will, they want to know where you get your facts, and they want to know that this person's name and the date when that happened. And if you don't, you're not a real historian, and you can't know anything at all because you don't know, random assortments of numbers. Instead of, cognitively understanding what happened, there's this big insistence on history being this thing that you can look at and that is, concrete, when, in general, the idea of anything being concrete, especially information wise, it's just like, well, who knows who's hiding information? Who knows who's, not telling the whole story? If you've been to high school, that that's kind of how people operate. So there could be lies, there could be, slanders, there could be all sorts of things when we're talking about a record of the past. There's untold amounts of potential for things to be skewed to benefit the people at the top, because that's, just like with economics, just like with the current, capitalist system or whatever, the money is funneled to those at the top because people at the top give everybody else jobs, is the theory. So kind of forget where I left off, but yeah, I won't be going necessarily fully into the history of anything. I won't be going into like a biblical study, like you better study up, nerds. But you know, it's more of viewing history as a single story, and from that, it being a combination of all of our stories. It's one story, but that single story is all of our stories interconnected. So that's how I'm viewing history in general. And then that's kind of why I like to more talk about pseudo history, because it's just, regardless of what facts I might have, I'm going to imbue it with my own personality and my own take on things. So if I just come at it with, yeah, I'm being pseudo historical because we as individuals can't help but put our own little zing on whatever we run into. So, um, just admitting that up front to y'all, the audience that I love so much, is, to me, it's just a basic respect, So I'm trying to have basic respect for anybody watching this video who might have varying opinions, religious or otherwise. First things first, I'm going to talk about Jesus here now. So with Jesus specifically, let's establish that he was born in Bethlehem. Okay. Now we're taking the Bible for what it says. So, there's lots of controversy around all of this. So I'm really just reading, I don't have the Bible around me, but it's like I'm reading the Bible, seeing what it says, and then being like, okay, so, because the Bible says there is Jesus. Because the Bible says Jesus is from Bethlehem, we're saying that Jesus is from Bethlehem. Okay. So now, Jesus is from Bethlehem, which is in Israel. So when Jesus was born, the state of Israel has been established. Or was it Judea? Regardless, it was Judea, and it's now called Israel. So there's lots of sand, murky sand, but essentially what I'm trying to say is that because he's born in Bethlehem, because he's born in an Israel or a Jewish state, we can say, for all intents and purposes, that Jesus is Jewish. Okay, Jesus is a Jewish person. He was born to Jewish people. He's in a Jewish land, as far as there can be a Jewish land. But I'll go into that more later. So, there's also connections of Jesus to the Essenes, but that's more of a philosophical group of individuals. I would definitely recommend looking up the Essenes, but it's just more that they are the group, if you want to say it, that Jesus would have belonged to. But that's a topic for more in-depth analysis. Now, having established that Jesus was Jewish and with the connection to the Essenes being pushed down a little bit, just for this video, we can see once Jesus begins walking around and talking, once he grows up, becomes a carpenter and everything. But once he starts actually interacting with people and people start being like, hey, this guy is different than other people. At that time, he's just a wandering teacher, or rabbi, depending on what lexicon you have. Jesus did and said many great things as this wandering rabbi. So he's this wandering Jewish teacher, and he's Jewish through being from the land of the Jews. So he's Jewish in that way. Jesus did and said many great things, taking the Bible at face. Yeah, so again, we're just reading the Bible and then talking about what you would see upon reading it. The basis of which was Jesus' connection to God. So the great things that he did was because, as he said, he was the Son of God, the embodiment of God. Um, these different great things included healing, walking on water, turning water into wine, etc. These were miracles of a Jewish person who self-identified as the embodiment of God. So just to simplify that, this was someone who was born basically in a family that was, practicing Jews, potentially. His dad was a carpenter. There's no real mention of what religion they followed. So just assuming that everybody followed the same religion might not be very accurate, but just them being from Judea, we're going to assume, that we're assuming here, that Jesus was born into the assumption that he was going to be a practicing Jewish person, because that's what happens. You don't get to separate what you're born from. Like, I'm Catholic just because I was born into a Catholic family. There's no, that's the background that I just forecast everything on. So, it's like, no matter how much I try to repress it, it's just been there since I was a kid. So I can't really escape my connection to, Christianity or Catholicism. So, same kind of situation would be going on if we're going to, believe that Jesus was a physical person. He would have physical difficulties, that we would all have as people. He's not above and beyond the difficulties. When he was crucified, and dying, he said, God, Father, why have you forsaken me? He still feels pain. He still feels, jealousy, loss, all of these things, because those are all part of the human condition of existing as a single individual entity in a sea of other entities. So let's see. Yeah, but Jesus being able to do these wondrous things is a perfect opportunity for us to isolate him as an individual. So not all Jews at the time or since then were seen as the Son of God. Like, the individuals weren't seen as representatives or embodiments of God. The Jewish people were seen as the chosen people. So it's more of an identity versus, group dynamic, like an individual versus group dynamic. Yeah, and many Jews weren't able to turn water into wine. It really is a miracle. But then also many Jews denied Jesus the Christ title, saying that he wasn't the Messiah and that there was a Messiah that would come later at the end times. So, in that way, we can see Jews distancing themselves from Jesus, even though he was technically Jewish or from the Jewish area. He wasn't a practicing Jew, as we can determine from how they try to distance themselves from him and establish how he wasn't as special as, the claim is being made. So yeah, the Jews denying, when I say they denied him Jesus the Christ title, Christ is just a word. It's actually Eucharist. Which is part of the Christian ritual. It's just really anointing with oil, and the Christ is supposed to be the anointed one, who basically the enlightened one. So being the Christ means being, the anointed. So yeah, from there, Jesus was Jewish by genealogical birth, being from there again, but was practicing an almost Eastern philosophy of renunciation, goodwill, and social equity. Although Jesus saw himself as God incarnate, which, might, seem selfish or like, oh, how could you think that you're God? Wouldn't that make you like the ultimate bastard, But that, wasn't the case. He believed himself to be God. And then what he was teaching and preaching and doing, according to the Bible again, he did not act as kings tend to act, gluttonous and luxurious and taking all of the resources and making people bow down to him. He washed the feet of poor people. He bowed down to poor people. Um, yeah, he was basically the individual who gave up even trying to have anything that most people would want to have, and just supported people that had nothing, and just constantly talked about giving, uh, and so I say all this to even to a greater extent widen the gap between, there's a Judaical Judaism, which is a set of tenets, and there's practitioners, and there's that relation of, practitioner of a religion, and that's what it would be to be a Jewish person. And instead, there is no real ever conversation that goes on where it's talking about Jesus learning about Judaism and that being what he's promulgating or spreading around, disseminating. So, and then with the Jews actively distancing themselves and saying that Jesus wasn't the Christ, and that Jesus was he was a messenger of God, and just like they did in Islam. They reference how Jesus is a special individual, but not necessarily the Messiah. And they point him out. They say, hey, look at this guy. He was special and worth mentioning, but not in a way that's like actually special. So it's really interesting what they do there. But with that condemnation, you can see that Jesus was not part of that group, because that group is ostracizing him. Or he ostracizes the group, whatever you want to. So this is where my interest sort of peaks. It's all just religious hubbub and old names of places I've never seen. But it really turns into a thought experiment at this point, because the aspect of where did Jesus get his teachings? I mentioned that there is no real, there's no part in the Bible where it says, and then Jesus sat down and read the Torah, and then Jesus sat down and understood Kabbalah. There's no reference to Jesus learning. So either he didn't learn anything, and was just like born with it, or, well, we can go into it. As he was the Christ, the chosen one, the anointed one, he was not Christian. So there's another separation there. So, he is what the Christians aspire to be. So that individual was not a practicing Christian, because he existed before Christianity. Not a practicing Jew, because they're not practicing what is being promoted by classically practicing Jewish people. He's instead of going to synagogue and following the tenets and everything, he's walking around, shaking hands, helping poor people, curing blindness, curing leprosy, just walking around and actually physically healing people. And that's so much different than, anybody else that was doing anything at the time. There's no relation of that to Jewish people, unless there's other Jewish mystics that are walking around healing people, and then they all just fall into the umbrella of being called Jesus. But, there's that potential. But Yeah, I'm just going to stop there, but yeah. Okay, I just go back into it. As not all Jews were able to perform such acts, Jesus is geographically Jewish, maybe Canaanite. So he's from Israel. He's from the area of where Israel is, but Israel, again, and I'm going to get into this later, is sort of an imposition that, God concocted and allowed the Jews to create Israel. Now, not getting into anti-Semitism or anything. Just watch the whole video. So, yeah, with Jesus teaching a separate doctrine than what Christians currently practice or would end up practicing, and different than what the Jews were practicing. He could be seen as a isolate teacher that's teaching a new study, a new in relative terms. Yeah, he's teaching. He's teaching in the here and now, doing direct things that are applicable to people's lives. They're not these highfalutin, abstract concepts. He's directly saying, he's telling people how to heal themselves. He's not giving you a bunch of complicated rigmarole that is just intellectual, workout. He's giving people direct information about how to heal themselves. Which is, it's just something that doesn't happen anymore. There's no, how can you have a church if everybody just knows how to take care of themselves? Yeah, so not being, teaching practical, applicable things, not being in synagogue, not forcing people to learn in this structured way and separate from, their practical everyday life. And not preaching the list of tenets, but instead imploring people to be good on their own terms. So to align themselves with their own, to not to ignore being good at all and just fuck it, but more to align themselves with their own internal sense of what is right and wrong. And that could be different for everybody, but just really focusing on the individual doing what they think is right, and not trying to get what you want, not trying to, be the smartest, but do what you think is right. He's actively encouraging people to do what they think is right, and then also to look within themselves and forgive themselves of anything that they find there, any thing that causes people to hate themselves. He's trying to get people to forgive themselves and get over their own self-hatred. Yeah, forgive yourself for any shortcomings. Thus, not Christian or Jewish, where did Jesus get his knowledge from? Some, myself included, believe that God provides knowledge from within. So you can go to books, and find words, but to even be able to process the words, you have to, gaining the ability to read is, just practice. But then the ability to understand what you've read is a further skill that comes beyond once you're able to read. Then once you get there, you have to be able to actually visualize what you're reading is talking about. And then from there, that's where you get meaning, from being able to visualize a further understanding of what you're reading instead of just reading the words and be like, yep, I read it. But like actually understand what's being communicated. Yeah, so any time that someone actually has knowledge that's worth anything, it's going to be from within themselves, and it's going to be a something that's not just parroted, that you can hear from anybody else. It's just another person saying the exact same thing. So generally, what you're going to hear most often, especially in the West, is probably not going to be true. we're being told, we're being pushed narratives of constant information that is not necessarily true, but once you're told a lie enough times, it becomes the truth. So um, there's that going on. Yeah. Okay. So you could say that Jesus's knowledge came from God. If you're not on the religious train, you might not like, saying that because it just feels a little empty. Um, so incorporating thoughts about collective unconsciousness and just the idea that, once someone has an idea somewhere in the world, that idea now exists in this collective, basically, basket that just stores all of the different ideas. And at any time, those ideas can be come upon by other humans because they already exist in the basket. So it's basically there's going to be one person who has to try really hard to come up with original thoughts, and then those original thoughts just exist in a repertoire or a reservoir. I just kind of think that the reservoir just exists and is it's kind of it's like a cloud. It's like it's like the cloud that we save music onto and stuff. But it just exists as a electromagnetic field that we subconsciously access. So I believe in that. So I believe that that collective unconsciousness is the mechanism through which God provides knowledge. So you could say it comes from God, but if you don't like that, you could say that it's the collective unconsciousness that pulls up the knowledge, but it's still coming from within inside of you. It's just you not wanting to say that it's God, but we know that collective unconsciousness is a mechanism that exists in the world. So just taking the pressure off of you, fully becoming a theological person. We'll just use this kind of language. There. Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, assuming that through collective unconsciousness is how God provides information to individuals. Um, Accepting that, you could now understand or justify, at least loosely, you don't have to accept it, but you can see that there is a justification for the idea that Jesus either got his very different teachings, which, he was teaching something that no one else in the area was really teaching, like, at all. So he either got these very different teachings from another person, from the collective unconsciousness, suggesting that Jesus wasn't the originator of these thoughts, that this wasn't uniquely something that he was doing. It was just something that was canonized and is now the official story. And he's the what do you call it? The cheerleader. He's the poster child of this. Um, there's a justification for that kind of thinking, or there's also this other way you could take it where his teachings are universal, so, and what I mean by that is that what he walked around and was teaching and telling people about was the inevitable uh, conclusion that you would come to if you practiced what he was teaching. So he was the ultimate practitioner of what he was teaching, and from there came this self-assuredness, but also this universal appeal, because he's not trying to tell you to believe in any specific morality. He's not trying to tell you to believe in any specific mythology. He's not presenting you with this story, this religious canon to become engrossed in and, like, lost in. He's literally telling you, hey, be a good person, listen to yourself. And, like, it's like, that's it. And you know, there's more to it, and it can, it again, a whole study, but like it, just seeing what most religions are, in a, you have to think this and you have to live this way and you have to, you have to pray to in this direction this many times a day. It's like all of those things. It's just like, yeah, Jesus would have had nothing to do with any of those things, and he would have actually said that those things get in the way of genuine spirituality because they're imposed from the outside. um, yeah, so mhm. uh, yeah, Jesus is taught what Jesus was teaching being universal. Um, Generally, is just a reference to that, what he was teaching. That to come up with those teachings is the inevitable conclusion of following the teachings, essentially, or inevitable conclusion of a person listening to themselves. So the teachings come from you, and you're basically teaching yourself, and then you expound, and like that's really all I'm doing right now. It's not like I just got things written down on a notebook piece of paper here. One second. Yeah, and that might be why my videos seem a little scattered sometimes, but it's really me just trying to on the spot come up with content and go into these different topics. uh, Yeah, so individuals listening to themselves as opposed to listening to higher authorities / outside sources um, is basically where the knowledge of, or the wisdom of Jesus, where that wisdom comes from. But that's not to say, that there's no use for higher authorities and that there's no need for outside sources. But as time progresses, we are, more and more seeing that our higher authorities do not have interests of the, especially the religious, but of the common person necessarily in mind when they are doing whatever it is that they're doing. So, and being 2021, I think that it's a good as time as any to not necessarily allow the narrative that's being pushed by big media to be where you get your information from or what makes your conclusions for you. I think this is a perfect time for us to really kind of do investigative research and look into any kind of different questions you have about anything, and really not stopping until you get to the bottom of it. And then, I'm probably going to do a lot more videos on Jesus and just the Middle East in general and kind of the history of it. But I might also just do world history videos, so we just have to see. And then, of course, with religion, there is the undercurrent of, especially in Christianity, of the astrotheological connection. So the idea that Jesus is just the Son, and that's why he's the Son of God, and it's this overlaid map of all of these astrology-based things. But that's definitely a different topic for a different video. I guess I will mention there's the cult of Aton in Egypt, and there's the cult of Mithras in Turkey, sort of, and Greece. And then there's Zoroastrianism, or just Zoroaster. He's often seen as the sun, or the embodiment of the sun, and it's that embodiment of the sun that would be a topic for a different time. Oh, so why I wanted to go kind of through that whole history of Jesus thing is because I wanted to kind of set up the paradigm of it's a four-way verses, and in one corner you've got there being a specific chosen one, right? In the other corner, across from it, you've got there's a group, a chosen group, the chosen people, and then below there's a group of chosen people. No one is chosen, and then below the chosen one, I guess that doesn't matter, but below the chosen one, everybody's chosen. So there's this four-way battle going on, which you can, using numerology, uh, you can see that it's related to the elements and that elemental paradigm is at play. I know I used paradigm twice. Um, yeah, so based on that, what I just set up, there's the chosen one, the chosen people, and no one is chosen. And from those three distinctions, we can kind of see a loose, um, image of the three Abrahamic religions. So Christianity, Jesus is the chosen one, and we follow him. Judaism, we are the chosen people, and we follow our traditions. And then in Islam, no one is really chosen. There's Muhammad, and there's other chosen people, but the idea that this is where I'm gonna get maybe some flack. The idea that Islam can exist as it does, being created 700 years after the birth of Christ or whatever. If you want to say Christianity started in 300-ish, Islam is starting 400 years after those things. And it's not that no one's chosen, but the state in which there's kind of an insistence on maintaining those things that we in the West kind of take for granted, like terrible treatment of LGBTQ people and the terrible treatment of women in general. These kind of things kind of reference the fact that there's in Islam there's not really an overall specialness to individual existence at all, and it's more for the when I say Jews think of themselves as the chosen people, it's not that Jews don't help each other, right? And Jews really support Jewish heritage and identity, which is it's a great that's great, and Christians, support other Christians and other non-Christians, and it's not that Muslims don't help people, but there's really an emphasis on the kind of the deadly terrain that Islam covers. There's lots of extreme, deserts and jungles, and it's kind of embodied in that religion where there's no one is seen as special in the eyes of the state, which is enforcing the religion. So, anything can happen to anyone at any time based on if it's basically deemed necessary. So there's really no one that's chosen, and it's more the state supports everything that goes on. And if you want to believe in a God, you should believe in the state. But yeah, I'll leave that there. So there's I mentioned there was the four elements, there was the four aspects to it, but those are the three aspects that kind of relate to the Abrahamic religions. But then there is that one piece left. So in modern context, the Jewish state of Israel, amidst a sea of Islam, is being commented on by Christians. So that's the three coming together. And that's also the distinctions of why, in my mind, and there could be more verbose reasons for the schism, but that is basically the distinction between the three of them. Christians believe there's a chosen single individual. Jews believe that it's their people that are chosen, and then in Islam there is not a lack of being chosen. anyone can be chosen if you choose to live your life for the state. Basically, it's not, you're not chosen. You can choose yourself to be a representative of the state, and then God rewards you. Thus the case for jihad. So in all three religions, Jesus is mentioned, and then instantly there is a move beyond Jesus into the necessity of obedience, the state, and superiority. Those exist in all three, so this isn't me ragging on Islam or anything. Jesus teaching none of that. So Jesus isn't teaching obedience. He's not teaching about the state, and he's not teaching about superiority. Obviously operates in a different mode than the big three religions do, and their practitioners and the people, the clerics and the different church members and everything, synagogue members, mosque members. So once we get to that point, we see that Jesus is operating on a different level than those three religions, because the three big religions that we're talking about really focus on controlling the individual that is participating in the religion. And what Jesus is saying is strictly opposite of that. And to be a true follower of Christ and not participate in the obedience, the state worship, or the sense of superiority that you're better than anybody else, or that there are people better than you, to distance yourself from that and to be an actual follower of Christ, you cannot allow any knowledge to be unquestionable. You could also just not participate in being obedient or worshiping the state or that sense of superiority, but all of those boiled down come from the tendency to not allow any knowledge to be unquestionable. It's not denying that there is truth in the world, but it's allowing yourself to question what has been established, not just to question it, but to engage yourself in it. And really it's giving the power back to you, and ask the questions that you want. There, at this point, there, lots of people say there are no dumb questions, and then, you ask a dumb question and you get smacked on the head, and it's like, you idiot, that was a dumb question. Well, there actually are no dumb questions at this point. And, don't let anybody smack you in the head, and just ask those questions, because the more and more you dig, the more you're going to find information that nobody knows about, because there's so much lingering from this, the obedience state worship, that all three religions were really, big on enforcing. So there's still that lingering ethos, even in the Western world, even in America right now. So yeah. So now, to bring it to more of the modern stage, for Palestine versus Israel, twice the state. Oh yeah, this is my opinion on the Palestine versus Israel situation. Twice the state, the Jewish state, was concocted and implanted into Canaan/Palestine. So there was two different instances of a Jewish state being made in the same area. The ones described in the Bible, God says this land belongs to you, to these nomadic peoples, and the nomadic peoples go in and establish this kingdom. What does that mean? Well, we can kind of assume that it wasn't just this wide open, vast plain of nobody being there, and they just lived there. And then, to establish a kingdom would just be like, oh, this is a kingdom now. So for them to have to establish a kingdom, there must have been deaths that happened. There must have been Canaanites that were living in the area that were either forced out or killed. Now I don't have that information, but it's just kind of implicative. Not that there, should be persecution against Jews or Palestinians. for everybody, getting along and not really holding people over the fire in that way of, causing even more pain and death, because I think that will just create more pain and death. But yeah, in acknowledging that in both instances, the biblical and in the 1940s after World War II, the creation of the state was of an invading power, right? And, to me, it's just like, as soon as you're like, oh, like white people invaded North America and like dispossessed all of the Native Americans, as soon as you hear that part of the story, it's just like, well, it might have needed to happen, and it's what led us to be where we are now. So there's ways of justifying it, but then it's also like, yeah, but they were just kind of from here, and we just kind of came in and like killed them all, So it's like, and there's just that parallel to, the creation of the Jewish state. So, as somebody who currently lives in a colony, I don't think that I would be necessarily just like, yeah, Native American, have my land and stuff, but so it's not like Jews already live in Israel, and, they're established and they're there. And it's not a justification for that. Because it's just so complicated that, if you want to take a hard stance, it's that the Jewish state had to be created, so therefore it's not it's not verifiable. It's not the natural setting. It has to be established and enforced, which, means that it shouldn't be there, because if it's not just what naturally occurs, then, that's, it's like it's not the original case of colonialism, but pretty close. They were nomads first, so they weren't this civilization that like invaded. They just, took it upon themselves to create this nation. So there are distinctions, and, it's not one way or the other. It's everybody's just got to be responsible for themselves. I don't believe that anyone would claim that colonization will be / has to be accepted by the natives of wherever you're colonizing. Like, obviously people are going to be like, hey, we've lived here for thousands of years without you being here, and now you're coming here and you're chopping down all the trees and you're doing all this stuff. We're going to be upset, and to not be like, oh, just to expect them to love us because of the civilization that they haven't known or needed for however long. It's just, I think there's a lot of cognitive dissonance there if you're just assuming that like any instance of colonization would be appreciated by the people being colonized. Like, obviously, Palestine's not going to like Israel existing, taking the land. There's, yeah. So, but I again, don't really have any connection to that land. I have connection to the earth, and that land is of the earth. So I have that connection, but I don't really have, I'm not going to give off I know the best thing. It's just really have an open mind. When you're looking at these things, don't belittle people that are involved. If you know people that have died in these conflicts, it's not to take any power away from you. It's not to say that your family shouldn't be there. It's to say that, everybody should be on earth, and, to have these, we're all humans, and to have these just huge fights that last millennia, I think it's a waste of valuable human energy that we could be putting towards, actually civilizing the entire world, and not, playing into these games of, who's better, who deserves more, who can be taken care of the most by the government. I think, anyway, yeah, so with that, I'd just say, do as Jesus taught, listen to yourself, forgive those around you, forgive yourself, and pursue the truth. Yeah, so that's really all I have. For today, sorry it was a little scattered, but actually, yeah. So when I broke up, or when I broke down the four ding ding ding, or ding 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 ding, uh, chosen one, chosen people, no one's chosen, and everybody's chosen. I would say that the message and the path of an actual practitioner and follower and worshiper, I don't think you should worship anybody, but an actual someone that actually wants to do as Jesus did, to be in that mode is to believe that everybody is chosen, right? And now once you're at that mode, you're playing in a different game. So all of these three huge, gigantic, established religions do not acknowledge that everyone's chosen. They actually acknowledge that that's not the case, and it's specifically not the case. And so there's going to be no one really in public spheres that will confirm this for you. There's not many people that are going to say everybody's chosen, unless they're doing it in this grandiose kind of, you can do whatever you want and there's no accountability kind of way. I think that everybody is chosen, but it's up to you to choose yourself. So it's not that everybody deserves to have good things happen to them. It's that everybody can choose to deserve to have good things happen to them. So, it's more about individual responsibility, and that you can be chosen if you take individual responsibility. Yeah. So with that, I will end this video, and I hope you guys liked it. It was a little bit religious. If you don't like that, or if I was too vague, or if you'd like to hear something else, something specific, or just have a general conversation with me, that'd be cool. But regardless, go ahead and hit the like button and subscription also button, and that subscription bell, and for those notifications, and I will catch you guys next time. Peace.